On today's episode of Fin Too Deep, myself and Neal Driscoll, we will discuss who could be a surprise cut or addition to the Miami Dolphins 53-man roster when those cuts come down. Also, we will talk about who needs to be some of the top performers tomorrow night when the Miami Dolphins have their preseason finale against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Plus, is Jonnu Smith this secret weapon for the Miami Dolphins offense this upcoming season? We got a ton to talk about. Do me the favor, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and as always, let's get into this.
Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score! Deep upfield on the near side, man open, touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's going over a touchdown again! Touchdown!
Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go!
You're listening to Fin Too Deep.
Tua back to throw. Blitz coming. They get to him. No, he takes off running. And he's in. Touchdown, Miami.
With the sixth pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Jalen Waddle.
Giving you unfiltered, informed, and controversial takes on the Miami Dolphins and the NFL Draft. Here's Reason and Neal.
What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we're back here for another one. And we are going to be talking about some cuts, some additions, all that, because next week for Fin Too Deep, me and Neal will make our roster predictions, our 53-man roster predictions. And if we're feeling a little funky, then you know what that means. Then that means we are going to probably, throw some practice squad possibilities on there too, if we're really feeling like it. So shout out to all of you. We are live on X and YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, please do me the favor, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new as you come through. All right, Neal, we got a lot to talk about today, but before we get into that, you haven't had a chance to come on YouTube and give your thoughts. So floor is yours, sir. Your thoughts on the Brian Flores and Tua Tagovailoa never going away beef.
Yeah, man, look, in 2024, I know one thing. Receipts never go away anymore, right? Like in the day of data and the internet, you put stuff out there, it's never going away, right? So I appreciate Tua's honesty because I think a lot of us knew what the scenario was, but, Tua kind of stayed in the shadows with it, right? And I think he's at a place professionally for him that he's comfortable telling it like it is. And, I saw Brian Flores do his little backpedal as well. I say it like this. We've had 2 years of NFL since, right, the whole debacle in Tennessee. 16 coaches have been hired. Not one of them is Brian Flores. And Tua Tagovailoa just got a top 3 quarterback contract of all time. So if you want to know who won the battle, he's the quarterback who dons number 1 for the Miami Dolphins. And that guy who's the defensive guru in Minnesota had the 18th ranked defense in Minnesota, where this quarterback had the number 1 ranked offense in Miami. People lie, numbers don't. So, the Brian Flores thing, I think it was important for Tua to get that off of his chest because obviously it was something that was inside there. And we see Tua with a little bit more swagger than we're accustomed to. And look, he seems confident. He seems relaxed overall. That's why I had the popcorn ready. I think this is going to be his best season as a pro, not just statistically, but I think this is the season where you start to see him win some of those landmark type of games. And, for everybody who's doubted him, I can say this. Once Tua gets that confidence rolling, we saw this at college, and I know the NFL is a different game. He at times can just put that ball where he wants it to go. And that's where, good for Tua. Maybe Brian Flores and him can find some mutual closure, as men, and shake hands and move on. But good for Tua for not letting, Brian Flores off the hook for that. For the bottom line is not just football. That's not how you treat people when you're a leader, right? You don't lead by minimalizing people and verbally abusing them. And I know what Tua gets paid, and I know his status, and I know it's the NFL, but to a lot of guys, this is their career. And it's just like any of us going into our jobs. And as soon as we walk in the door, your boss is like, "Hey, Neal, how's your day going? You suck. You suck at everything you do. Why'd you get out of bed this morning?" Right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
not only that, your boss would text that to you, Neal, while you're at home sitting on the couch drinking a mimosa. You're going to get a text message saying, "Oh, hey, Neal, what's going on? You suck. You don't belong here."
Right. And it's really odd behavior. And it's one of the biggest fallacies of trying to be a coach in the NFL is emulating someone else rather than be yourself.
Exactly.
Brian Flores was never going to be Bill Belichick, and that's who he thought he was. We've seen all these pretenders leave New England and fail because they try to operate. But you know what? Results.
And look at everyone coming from San Francisco, Neal. They're all different personalities from Kyle Shanahan.
Right.
They don't coach like Kyle at all. McVay's different. McDaniel's different, et cetera, et cetera. They're all different.
Right. Well, I'm happy it's out. I don't view it as a distraction at all. I view it as, a footnote on the training camp season. It's not obviously something that a lot has changed where this team, Tua is the straw that stirs the drink for the Miami Dolphins. There's no ifs and doubts about it anymore, right? Like that Tua that we saw at the end of the Tennessee was a bruised and battered guy with no confidence, and he played like that ever since Mike McDaniel came and put Humpty Dumpty back together, man. It's just been beautiful to see.
It's true, man. And you know what? I made this point, Neal, and you're a parent. You got multiple children like me. I've said this because I've heard people come out here and some of them are parents. "Oh, well, it's just tough love." First of all, there was no love whatsoever. Okay. It was just tough. Second of all, listen, I get none of us would call up our kids' employers, but do you all think we would be happy with an employer speaking to our own children this way? And this is where I go back to. It's like some of these people treat these players like they're subhuman, Neal. Like you're an entertainer, so you make all that money. You're subhuman. You could be treated like that.
Right.
It's wild. And, you look over, especially like the last, 15 years, Neal, the Tom Coughlins, the Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick was the last of a dying breed in terms of how he coached, right? I don't know if you happened to see the conversation, but it was a really good segment. It's only about 10 or 11 minutes long on Nightcap with Ocho Cinco and Shannon Sharp when they talked about it. And Shannon basically said, like, when he got traded to the Ravens, he walked into Brian Billick's office and he said, "Listen, I want you to coach me. I want you to be hard on me, but you ain't going to curse at me. You ain't going to cuss at me. You ain't going to say things to me that," how he is with his grandmother, right? "You ain't going to say things that I wouldn't let my own grandmother talk to me about." While Ocho Cinco was over here talking about like how Hugh Jackson and Marvin Lewis, how they used to just cuss at Ocho Cinco, but then on the flip side, they let Ocho Cinco send gifts to like secondary players and stuff like that because he's like, "That's how I was brought up when I was coached." You know what I mean? And they talked about the whole narrative. You can't sit here and say Tua Tagovailoa is soft. We know his dad, how hard his dad was on him. While kids were going to play at the beach, his dad would say to him, "Okay, we're going to the beach." Tua would get there, and what would it be? "We're running drills in the sand. We're not playing." He was under Nick Saban, right? Who's one of the toughest coaches there is, but he produced results. It's about, and Ocho even talked about this. And the guy who basically said he let coaches swear at him and stuff. One of your jobs as a coach is to understand your personnel and how to get through them. You got 53 players on your roster. That's 53 different personalities. Not every single one of those 53 personalities is going to respond to the same style of coaching. That's just life. That's just how it works. And Brian Flores, my issue with Brian Flores is you came in here acting like Belichick without his resume.
Right. And there's been an evolution, not to make this a psychology session, but when I grew up in the 80s, man, me and a lot of my friends, a lot of my cousins, we got tough love, man. Like I had a tattoo of a coat hanger on my ass when I was 8 years old, right? Like it was just a different world. I am a parent that's never laid a hand on any of my children. I challenge them through, incentives and rewards, but punishments, kind of taking away things from them. It's just a different world than you used to be. And, you're getting these, Tua at that time was 23 years old. And he's got the greatest opportunity that his family and him dreamed of. And for a guy to try to steal that from him, right, ruling like, in an authoritative figure the way he wanted to be, it just never was going to work. And Tua is the polarizing one. But there's Austin Jackson, there's Jalen Phillips, there's Minka Fitzpatrick. There's a lot of stories with Brian Flores behind the scenes. Yeah. That, the Tua was the most, obviously noticeable one. But Brian Flores, like, I do think he could coach defensive football, and I don't want to take that away from him. But I think he was an absolute horror show as a leader of men, even though he thought his bravado and his approach was my way or the highway. He had never earned that right as a player or a coach to demand that from other players. And that's why half the NFL is turnover coaches, and he only got 2 interviews and only progressed in 1 out of 16 jobs. That's not a good batting average. So, I don't think Brian Flores will probably ever be a head coach.
It's going to be a while. And the lawsuit against the NFL is going to play into part to that too, right? So I think Tommy B nailed it. He said, as a Miami resident, the idea of Flores was simply too tough as BS. The core issue was Flores' disrespectful attitude towards 2 of the front office and other Dolphin players, including that. I would agree with that. It wasn't about tough coaching. It was about his lack of respect. I would agree with that. I mean, you got Nick Hicks coming on my show and talking about Albert Wilson, telling him people were walking down the hallway with their head down, not even saying hi to people as they passed. And, even Albert Wilson could feel this was the weirdest energy he's ever been around.
Right. And the NFL didn't make those report cards as give it as much exposure as they do now. But there was no way in hell when the Dolphins were with Brian Flores that they would have been number 1 across the board in any category.
We couldn't even get an offensive coordinator. You think Frank Smith, let alone Darrell Bevell, would take a lesser job than what Darrell Bevell is an offensive coordinator in this NFL? You think you'd take a quarterback job under Brian Flores?
No, and I think that where Mike McDaniel has had some deficiencies as he's learning to coach, he has done such a tremendous job at building the culture. And where I think the Dolphins are heading, like I always think that as fans, we're 1 year ahead of where the team is on their path, right? Like, because we want instant gratification. We want a winner. This team, we're starving for a Super Bowl. So I actually think that this is the year, and I'm knocking on wood here, barring any injury, that the Dolphins are actually going to be the most dangerous team, that version of this team. And that's without Christian Wilkins. And that's without Robert Hunt. But and we're going to talk about some of them later. I think they've done a lot to actually make this offense better. And I think the defense is going to be on par or better than what it was last year. And they won 11-6 with the amount of injuries they had. And we all know that Aaron Rodgers got hurt for the Jets, and their season was lost. No other team experienced from top to bottom the star talent that we had out with Ramsey missing half a season, Connor Williams missing half a season, Teron Armstead missing half a season, Robert Hunt missing 6 games, Devon Achane missing 5 games, Waddle missing a game here, Tyreek missing a game here. We missed a lot of players over the course of the time, man. And that's where, like, a lot of people say the Dolphins beat bad football teams, right? They went 11-6 despite that amount of injuries. There's got to be some kind of credit given to that. To win 11 games in today's NFL, I don't care who you play, because we do not penalize other teams like the Buffalo Bills for losing to absolute trash teams that we beat by 50 points, right? We just don't do that. There's got to be some commonality there. And that's where, like Mike McDaniel, man, I really like where the team is from a culture standpoint. And in the long scheme of it, this is as a player acquisition business. That's why Calais Campbell's coming here for $1 point whatever million. That's why Jalen Ramsey's forcing his hand to Miami. And anything you can do to cheat the salary cap in today's NFL will pay big dividends down the road. And that's where you get good players at discount. Like Calais Campbell might be the best value in the entire NFL right now. Like for real, at that salary that he's getting paid, the way he's throwing people around at camp, like Calais Campbell, man, that's one guy that I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point because I was listening to I've had him on the show before, Zach Shalmer of Strong Opinion Sports, and him and his co-host. I was watching their like NFC East and AFC East predictions, and they were both talking about you got to give that Dolphins team credit for going 11-6, and the reason why. What can you expect us to do on the back end of that schedule last year with all the injuries that we had piled up defensively and offensively, right? Chubb and Phillips out, Tyreek and Waller both banged up, Raheem Moser can't stay healthy. We got offensive line interior issues, right? Between Connor Williams and Isaiah Wynn, right? And, like you said, Robert Hunt even missed time. And then we were just banged up. Ramsey, like you said, missed time too. Javon
Howard missed a lot of games. Javon Holland, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Javon Holland had two. Were they sprained MCLs? That's what I'm worried that happened to him again. I'm worried that he sprained one of those MCLs again, and that's why he's missing time right now with Javon Holland. That's what I'm worried about, anyways. But to your point, and to the point that I was making. When you add up, like, they're not depth guys. We were missing legitimate guys who are Pro Bowl or cusp of Pro Bowl talent. Like, when that schedule, like, and that's why those final 6 games this year, going up against the Rams, what's the final 6? Like the Rams, the Niners, the Jets twice, Cleveland, and there's one other team in there too. But those final 6 games, we've got to be as healthy as possible on that back end, man, because, our final 2 games, we close out in Cleveland and in New York. So we're going to have to be healthy. I mean, and we saw, Deshaun Watson, I mean, we faced the Cleveland Browns in 2022, McDaniel's first year, and that was one of 2 of his most efficient games as a passer, right? He had over 12 different receivers. Tyreek Hill didn't even he had 60 yards in that game, and Tua was just lights out in that game, and we beat that good defense or whatever. We're gonna need to be able to do that, and to in the December month, and to be able to do that, we are gonna need to be as healthy as possible, sir.
Yeah, we get to exercise all the demons this year, right? And we're naming injuries. We didn't even mention Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, right? Like, there were so many that you can't even you forget them, But we can win in December. We can win in the cold. We can erase any doubt. And sure that the schedule at the end kind of looks tough now, but there's a lot of wood to chop between now and then, right? Like, the Jets, they're an old team that are relying on a 41-year quarterback. I'm not even sure if he makes the whole season, right? And you never know what it's going to look like. But that, I like that the Dolphins' schedule is shaped like that, because for them to become the team that I want them to be, a team that can actually be a threat to a championship, it's not let's waltz into the playoffs, let's limp into the playoffs and whatever it is. Go win the damn division. Go establish yourself as the contender. That's what I want this year. No more of this half-ass, no wheels falling off. And I will say this. I appreciate the way they've handled the preseason, because I think all these little injuries are all just kind of football, whatever, like checking the box reports. I think they have a lot of players on pitch counts here in training camp. And I think they might have certain players on pitch counts during the regular season as well. Meaning if they get up, you might see some people, but I like what they're doing. It's more like, some management, I think, of the roster with the bigger picture in mind versus kind of getting everyone out there. Cause we have avoided, any disaster so far with one preseason game to play. I don't know how much our starters really need to play this week. Sure. I hope not, but getting out of this preseason fairly healthy would be awesome. And then you get a home game against a Jacksonville team that you're just straight up better than to open up the season. And
I think, bro, those first 8 weeks, you gotta you have to come out of those first 8 weeks 6-2 or 7-1, right? and you got a chance at home. You got to beat Buffalo at home in week 2. But I mean, Jacksonville, Buffalo, Seattle, Tennessee, New England, then a bye, then Indianapolis, then Arizona. I mean, you got to either at worst 6-2 or run that damn table just to set yourself up for those final 6 games. Because the team that I was missing was the Houston Texans in those final 6 games. You end with Green Bay, the Jets, then Houston, then San Fran, then Cleveland, then the Jets again. And before that, before the Green Bay, we have the Rams after the second time we see the Bills in week 9, and then we got the Raiders and New England. So, those first 8 weeks, 8 weeks, you got to come out of those. You got to come out of that like 7-0, 6-1, 5-2 at worst, and then you got to turn around, and that it's going to set you up, I think, for that final 6 games, because you're going to have to go 4-2 or 5-1 in those. If we come out 1-5 or 2-4 in those final 6 games, what's going to be the narrative, Neal? Oh, look they had another tough part of their schedule in the December, January months, and they still can't win. That's what it's going to be.
And that's what I really like about this schedule, right? Is you get a home opener. I think that's always a feather in the cap. You got that home field advantage. I know Jacksonville is not far from Miami, but the Heat at Miami, I just think we're a better football team. You get a chance in week 2 when we talk about exercising the demons. Like, you go there and you beat the Bills on primetime. And you know what? You should kick their ass. There is not a team, in my opinion, that has lost more talent this offseason than the Buffalo Bills. If you would ask me last year who the Bills' 3 best players, it would be Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Matt Milano. And Diggs won't be there. Gabe Davis, I hear Bills fans kind of back them on saying that he didn't matter. Well, dude, he fucking made some plays against us. And that secondary, those vets, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, and Tre'Davious White were a bane in the Dolphins' existence. So I hear them. I know the players they have. We cover the draft. I know Cole Bishop. I know Christian Benford. I think they severely downgraded across the board. And I still think Josh Allen is as good as any quarterback not named Pat Mahomes in football.
And neither one of us was high on Keon Coleman, right? You weren't high. I know I wasn't.
I see some upside in him, but I don't think he's making an impact. Oh, and we probably won't even see Curtis Samuel there now, right? No, we won't see him. He's out 4 to 6 weeks. So we won't even see Curtis. Yeah, we won't even see Curtis Samuel. They lost Leonard Floyd, Mitch Morse. Like, they lost a lot of talent, man. And, that's me. And I think the Miami Dolphins drafted Chop Robinson with Josh Allen in mind. I think the reason they took a guy like Chop is like, who beats us in this division? Oh, Josh Allen. All right, we got an answer for that. And,
let's put 2 great athletes on each side between Phillips and Chop, right?
Right, and Zach Steeler is the Buffalo Bill killer, right? Like he's just got the Bills number, and I'm on record to say this. I don't know how much we really downgraded from Wilkins to Calais Campbell, man.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't even know if it's a downgrade at all. I'll be honest, I don't know. I know that he's older and he's longer in the tooth, and maybe Wilkins does play the run fairly better than him, but it's not by much. But one thing that Campbell, just like Emmanuel Ogbah, he gets his hands on so many balls, man. He's such a presence out there, and he's such a good damn leader. Like, we needed we talk about tone setters, right? When he says, get that beep out of here to Baker Mayfield, like, that's the kind of stuff that I want, man. I don't want this team to be the team with the pretty uniforms that goes out there and runs around. I want this team to be the team that wears pretty uniforms, runs out there and punches people in the mouth, right? Like, that's what I want to see, man. So, like, no, man, I like it. It's exciting, man. This should be the season for us. Like, 11 wins is going to win this division. I'm confident that 11 wins is going to did it. They did it last year with a lot of injuries. I think the coach is going to be better. The quarterback's going to be better. They're going to be healthier. And I think they actually have a better – I know they have a better back 7 for sure. Mm-hmm. I think Kendall Fuller is a severe upgrade to Xavier.
Well, and Neal, you talked about Phillips. Well, I talked about Phillips, but you talked about Chop Robinson and Josh Allen. I think that's why they went out and upgraded the second level as well with guys like Jordan Brooks and guys like Anthony Walker and a guy we're both going to talk about today, Curtis Bolton. I think it's also guys who can try and cover every blade of grass so this guy isn't killing you, but they also can flip their hips and drop back into coverage if you need them. Now, I know David Long was getting a little worked in coverage yesterday, but I think he's nursing an injury. But, I think we've gotten better, especially when Anthony Walker returns. I think we've gotten better on the coverage level on the second level as well.
Right. And like Jordan Poyer, for example, I don't think Jordan Poyer is the player that he was at his peak. That's why the Dolphins got him such a favorable contract. He was ranked top 70 by his peers. But what I would say to that is I think Jordan Poyer is really going to be a good player for us against the Bills because he knows how to play in the box. And he knows a lot of Josh Allen's tendencies. And I think that Jordan Poyer is going to make his kind of paycheck here in Miami. I'm not really worried about him covering half the field like Ed Reed would, right? Like, I'm more about him being a savvy football player that can make some plays around the line of scrimmage. He does get his hands on some balls and creates some turnovers. That's what I want. I want him to be kind of chaos at the line of scrimmage. So, yeah, man, there's a lot to like about this team heading into the season.
Ton to like. Ryder, go follow him on Twitter. He said, on YouTube. Ryder McConville says, biggest things for the DL room is the depth to actually rotate now. Wilkins and Seiler played a ridiculous amount of snaps. Shout out to Brad Martin. He came through and he just gifted 5 memberships to the channel. So, man, shout out to you for doing that. I appreciate you for growing the Phinside community. I got my episode of 3 Takes will be coming tonight with the written update coming for channel members. So be out on the lookout for that. And Ryder he makes a good point about the amount of snaps. Right now, if you look at Christian last year, Christian played about 895 snaps and 952 the year before that.
Wow.
Last year, Calais played about 712. And the biggest difference is obviously Christian had about 331 snaps on run defense. Calais had about 289. And another big difference is Christian had 563 against the pass to Calais' 413. Now we know there were stories that came out of Atlanta with Calais basically saying, why are you taking me off the field? And the pass rush for Atlanta would become non-existent when he would come off the field. Now I think he's still a guy who you could push for if he's healthy, he's got the juice in the tank. You could push for 750, if he's already doing 715, that's just like a 35 snap count increase. 800 might be a stretch, but you look at the rotation they built. Was our rotation behind Seiler and Wilkins as deep as we have this year? I mean, I'm going to talk about Peely in a bit, but we just basically had Deshaun Hand back there. Now they've added Benito Jones. Neville Gallimore is making plays. Hell, they got tough decisions on guys like Isaiah and Mack and Leonard Payne when the cut days come. So I think they've got actually a deeper and better rotation behind their top 2 guys than what they had last year.
Right, yeah, and that's honestly that's what the Dolphins have been lacking for years, man, is that depth, right? Like they've had to rely on their starters and their top guys so much, man. It's actually good seeing them have the ability to kind of get people to rest because it's better to see them when they're fresh. Like I love what their pass rush is going to be when healthy. Like I love it. Like and I count Campbell in that. And I'll say this, man, getting a guy like Agba back for the contract they got him was a savvy move because, like whether he's an edge, a DN, he's a good run defender, man, and he can get some of those snaps on the D line too. I think Anthony Weaver is going to be pretty strategic on how he employs the personnel here, and like Baltimore, right where he came from, man, it was a rotation. People were playing. And we'll see because I still think that there's a move that's going to be made on this defensive line. I see the Commanders are already starting that little fire sale already early. It only makes sense, man. So I still think there's a move. And we've talked about Jonathan Allen, but if Daron Payne is a consolation prize, he's a prize you can sign me up for. So if he becomes available, and I do think the Dolphins are going to be buyers. I know, Chris Greer, he's a buyer right now in this window, and
well, we got the confirmation when they were in on Judon, right?
Right, and it just shows you they'll make the move if they have to, and it probably won't be a guard. So let's not get upset about it.
Yeah. We hope it is, but we're not holding our breath because we'll be dead by the end of this podcast.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I agree with that. All right, let's start getting into this. First thing, let's go over here is give me a name that you feel a fringe player. Before we get into our, potential surprise cuts or additions here, give me a fringe player you think needs to have a big performance tomorrow to kind of put his stamp on and give himself the best shot. I mean, I'll give you two names just off the top of my head. They just came out of their contact jerseys. I think Jody Fortson and Tanner Connor, one of those guys, because you listen to the beat reporters and it kind of sounds like if they are going to carry four, Fortson's kind of in that spot right now. But I think if Tanner Connor can repeat what he did in that first preseason game a little bit while Fortson is quiet, I think that might bump a guy like Tanner Connor up over Fortson if they're going to carry four. Because let's be honest, it's the Durham Smythe, the Jonnu Smith, and the Julian Hill show, no matter what. So that would be a guy, and I think defensively, I think a guy who needs to have a game. If you want me to give you a defensive one, I think Quentin Bell needs to have a game. We heard about how I was going to say. We heard how hot he was a couple weeks ago. He's gone quiet. He hasn't really been big or impactful in the preseason games. I would say Quentin Bell defensively would be a guy. And any guys you're looking at need to have a big game for you?
Yeah, and I'll double down with you on Quentin Bell. Like, look, you can make all these plays in a practice and look like the workout warrior for a week or two. But if that doesn't translate to the football field and game day, we know they were flirting with Matt Judon. Like, I think that's directly at Quentin Bell. I don't think Quentin Bell is as much of a lock as people think to make this roster right now, especially with Jalen Phillips' health being promising. So Quentin Bell needs to make some plays this week. And then, then I turn my attention to the pass catchers here, right? Like, I think I know because the River Craycraft situation pretty much ensures that certain people are probably going to make this team. I think Odell, Waddle, Tyreek, Malik Washington. I've seen some people saying they don't have him on the final 53 man. I don't see how that is. I think he's definitely. If you put him on the practice squad, goodbye Malik Washington. There's no chance. He's staying here. It makes no sense to me. But I think Eric Uzakama needs to have another game to solidify his roster spot. I really do. Because I think Berrios is going to figure himself on this roster. And I'm not saying they might not. They might just say, with decisions we have to make, we'll carry 5 because we know we have River Craycraft coming down the road. Like I think Eric Uzakama has a lot to build off of from last week. He was kind of the bright spot on, I'll be honest, an offense that honestly has been very underwhelming to me in the preseason outside of Jalen Wright. And obviously that stellar Tua drive last week. But, I think that you need to see Eric Uzakama continue to show that he can do it. He's done well a lot in the preseason, though. So I think
he's locked in. I think he's locked.
He has. We know he has a unique skill set compared to the other guys. And
I think Craycraft's injury saved Berrios, and I think Uzakama's play has locked him in ahead of Berrios. If you want my honest opinion here,
I would hope so. I would hope so. I like Berrios as like the special teams guy who might get a target or two a game, and that's about it.
Yeah. I had a question in the chat about we're going to do our regular season roundtable. I'm going to talk to Neal and everyone involved, but I'm looking for September 2nd, 3rd, or 4th probably. So we'll keep you posted. We do it every year, So we'll and we might have a new body added to the lineup this year. So I'm looking for the beginning of the September 2nd week, before the regular season kicks off that weekend. So for all of you waiting for that, that'll be coming probably that week. All right. So, all right, let's get into, let's, actually let's keep it because I talked about tight ends anyways. Now, last year, first of all, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new. There's over 775 of you watching between Twitter and YouTube. 450 of you on YouTube right now alone. Smash that like button, subscribe if you're new. On our way, we just passed 16K, on our way to 20K. Jonnu Smith. You know, I would do my show every 4 weeks last year with Omar, Cover 4 podcast. And, you know, we would talk about this multiple times. And he would say, hey, they're fixated on Julian Hill. And he ended up being right, 110%. But I said they were going to upgrade this tight end room. It was just there's way, you know, you saw Durham Smythe in those last 4 or 5 games when he started getting utilized as a receiver. You saw the potential of if they added a seam threat or if they added a weapon in line who can flex out to the slot or be a big slot or be a big boundary guy, that there was serious potential here. They've added Jonnu Smith. We've seen the end around plays, Neal. We've seen, you know, Chris Perkins has talked a little too much about what they've done in the red zone to the point where I'm pretty sure the Miami Dolphins have talked to Chris Perkins about him tweeting out how we were doing 2 tight end sets with Chris Brooks in the backfield and all this kind of jazz. And you've heard him ask questions too about the red zone. He's really fixated on the red zone and how different we look this year. Is Jonnu Smith this secret weapon for this Miami Dolphins offense? Are we talking about a guy who could get 400 to 600 yards, but rack up some real red zone touchdowns for this team?
Yeah, and Jonnu was the first move we made this offseason, right? Like, it was the first move we made all offseason. And to me, it's kind of like if you eat Taco Bell at 8 o'clock, it's okay. If you eat it at 2 in the morning, it's amazing, right? Circumstances matter. And I think Jonnu's always been a good football player, but I think here in Miami, he has the opportunity to have his career year.
I agree.
And I think this is where I try to tell people this, and they think I'm insane. And this is other people's teams, not Dolphins fans, but like I actually think the Dolphins offense has the potential to be substantially better than they were last year. And we know they brought in Odell, right? I like Odell for the fact that I think as a number 3 receiver in clutch moments, he's a guy that can rise to the occasion. As good as Tyreek and Waddle have been as football players, their one struggle has been rising to the occasion in these big games. There's not a stage that's too big for a guy like Odell Beckham. Then the youth movement, Jalen Wright and Malik Washington. How much of an impact they make in year 1 as a rookie remains to be seen. But they will get opportunities. And for me personally, I think Jalen Wright's going to find a way to get a lot of carries by the end of this year. So you added those 2 young guys that develop, and then you have a tight end. Durham Smythe is a really good football player at what he is asked to do. He is the lunch pail guy. He does all the dirty work, but let's not kid ourselves. He's as pedestrian as there is as a receiving tight end in this football league. Enter Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is so dynamic. He is as dynamic as a tight end as we've seen here. I mean, he's just simply a better football player than Mike Gesicki. He really is. And
I agree.
He's going to have an 800-yard, 6 touchdown type of season for me. And I mean, man, he's just another weapon in this offense. Like, what is he, the 5th option? Like, that's just crazy to me that you have Jonnu Smith as your 5th option.
Might even be lower depending on where Achane lands as a receiver this year.
Right. And I really like the combination of Jonnu and Durham Smythe together. And I'll say this, Julian Hill has made a believer of me. He has had a hell of a camp. He's had a hell of a camp, and he is a good number 3 wide receiver here. So I will say this, man, like the Dolphins tight end position is underrated. In fact, I was just telling you before we hopped on here that I have my fantasy football drafts next week. Well, if you're in the league with me and you let Jonnu Smith slide too far down there, he's going to be on Team Dynasty. That's my team name, Dynasty. So he will be on my team because I think he's a tremendous value. And I do think Mike McDaniel is kind of like a kid in a candy store with Jonnu Smith and finding ways to use him.
Yeah. You didn't go with the Hawk Tua name, huh?
Nah. I've been Team Dynasty for 18 and 19 years in these leagues.
Bro,
man.
I'm surprised you haven't been
old
just
head.
I'm surprised you just haven't been Driscoll, and your profile picture is a back of Jack Driscoll's jersey, bro. I'm surprised that hasn't
Dude,
been your name, eh?
No. If anyone wants to get me a Christmas gift, you got to get Siren Neal and Jack Driscoll next to each other.
That's true. That is true. That is true. Shout out to all 800 of you watching between X and YouTube right now, and specifically shout out to all of you on YouTube, over 450 of you watching. All right, so let's get into this. All right, let's start off with name me a player who you think could be a surprise cut. Neil, you can go first on offense. Sorry, you can go first in general. I'll go first on the who could be a surprise addition.
Okay.
But name me a player. You can give me one offense and one defense. What doesn't matter. Name me a player who you think could be a surprise cut for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, on defense, I think despite having a good off season, that Marcus May is going to have an uphill battle making this team, and that's not even because I think Patrick McMorris is going to make it. I just think the Dolphins are extremely depth in the secondary because young players are rising, and so I think as good as Marcus May has been, I think he's a release and a guy that if they could stash him on the practice squad, they'd probably like to find a way to do it. But I think he's going to have a tough time in an offense, maybe as a surprise. I think Miami's growing tired of Isaiah Wynn, and they like Lester Cotton. They like Robert Jones. They like Liam Eichenberg. Yes, I don't know why they do, though. I think they could reach an injury settlement with Isaiah Wynn here and just say, you know what, we tried this for 2 years. Round peg, square hole's not working, and best of luck to you.
So for me, that could be a surprise cut. I think Jeff Wilson Jr., especially when Chris Brooks comes out of concussion protocol before the Jacksonville game, I think that's a real possibility. And then two guys who I think on the defensive side could be surprise cuts are Nick Needham and Duke Riley. I think Nick Needham, to your point, I think Marcus May is going to make this roster. I also think Elijah Campbell and Patrick McMorris I think they're going to carry like 5 safeties. And so you look at the depth that's coming up at corner as well with the UDFAs, that could, but I know he's a hybrid safety and corner, but the movement, the youth movement could really work against a guy like Nick Needham. And on the second level, and I'll explain why when we get into the additions here, I think Duke Riley is legitimate. Now, I know he contributes in special teams, but I think Duke Riley is legitimately in trouble right now because there are certain guys rising at linebacker right now. And, I think there is a legitimate possibility. And remember, with Nick Needham and Duke Riley, the one thing Jeff Wilson has is staff familiarity. Nick Needham and Duke Riley, all the new defensive guys that came in staff-wise, they owe nothing to these guys. They're not their guys. So those are two names that I think could be surprise cuts. You know what I mean?
On Duke Riley reason, whenever there's financial reward, right, in two players, right? Duke's, I think, a $2.5 million cap savings, it puts you in the green almost $2 million to go the youth route. And look, down that stretch when the Dolphins played their worst football last year, the worst player on the team was Duke Riley. He was awful out there, like awful. So I think I think Channing Tindall has outplayed Duke Riley this preseason.
Yep, I agree.
I think another guy that you're going to mention in a minute has outplayed him in this offseason. I think Duke Riley is. I think his time in Miami is coming to an end. And, he's been an okay player here based off of what he was in the cost. But, we went out and got Jordan Brooks and Anthony Walker, two physical, 2 down, I'm going to hit you in the face linebackers. We got to get away from these guys that are like these tweeners that they say that are good in coverage yet can't cover anyone. You know what I mean? It's going to when we get to our top 53 next week, it is going to be challenging, man. It is going to be tough.
Let me ask you this, talking about cuts before we go on to additions here. Who wins this quarterback 2 battle?
Skyler, because of the money. Mike White saves us $4 million, right? That's a lot of money. It's
not like it's vastly outplaying Skyler, right? They're both bad.
Oh man,
You know?
I'll tell you, and I do think the Dolphins are one of the teams that are sniffing a trade for Dorian Beckham. Not Dorian Beckham. That's
Dorian Thompson.
Robinson Thompson from UCLA,
DTR.
who I liked, dude. I had a low third, early fourth round grade on him, and I know he was a rookie in Cleveland.
I can't believe Cleveland's going to move off of him, especially Deshaun Watson's hurt.
Well, they have Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it's almost like
because the other two names I like is whoever loses that battle in Houston between Davis Mills and Case Keenum.
Sure,
because they've both proven they can run a type of they've both been an offshoot. Davis Mills has been an offshoot of the system for 2 years now under Slowick. Case Keenum can run an offshoot of the system. So those are the other two. But yeah, man, DTR developmental wise, bro.
Yeah,
that's interesting for me.
And in the grand scheme of things, I do think next year, with the abundance of draft picks the Dolphins have, they have to go and reset the backup quarterback position. Whether that, they have, I think round 5 is a perfect opportunity with 2 picks, especially that Denver pick they have, which could be a top 5 pick in the 5th round. Keep an eye on some of those quarterbacks that could fall, because I think that after this season, right, you move on from all these backups and get some fresh blood. Why I like Dorian Thompson Robinson, I know he changed his name.
Yeah, DTR.
Why I like him is I like this skill set he brings because it's unique to Tua. And I know when you get a quarterback, you want them to be able to do the same things your quarterback does, but a lot of times they just can't, right? So catch them off guard a little bit with some of those things. But oh my God, yeah, I agree, man. The biggest disappointment for me this whole preseason. I thought the Dolphins backups were going to light up teams. I really did, with all the weapons we have. They've been bad.
I wish Jake Bailey could be a surprise cut.
Yeah, he's awful, man.
I don't know how they didn't bring in Matt Araiza. This must be Jake Bailey must be the best holder Danny Craftsman's ever seen. And Neal, we both come from the eras when we played high school and we played college ball. Neal, the backup quarterback was the holder, not the punter.
Right? That's one of the most puzzling decisions, how this guy has the job security. And I see in the chat, I really like KJ Jefferson. Central Florida this year.
Yeah, he used to be at Arkansas.
When I think of a guy in the 5th round, that's exactly a name that comes to my head.
I like it. All right, so let's get into who could be surprise additions and make the final 53. Once again, I got 3 names, but they're all defensive. I mean, go ahead. You can give a couple and try and throw an offensive one if you want. But the guys that I have, and they're kind of playing off each other, right? Like Nick Needham, I could see being a surprise cut for a surprise ad of a Storm Duck, who's been lights out in camp, in the preseason games. Storm Duck, Isaiah Johnson, and Jason Maitre as UDFAs have all showed a lot in terms of, they deserve to be on the practice squad at worst. I've been saying it all preseason. Omar quote tweeted me because I guess he doesn't believe it, but I will say Brandon Peely's making this 53. I don't care what anyone tries to tell me.
Omar doesn't think he's going to?
And now he kind of quote tweeted me he kind of don't believe it. But, I love Omar, but this is the same guy who called Devon Achane Salvin Ahmed last year in training camp. So, I only
been awesome.
He's making it. Yeah, bro, he's making it. And playing off what we were just talking about with Duke Riley, man, Neal, how can you look at a guy like Curtis Bolton and say, you know what I mean? Curtis Bolton has looked much better than Duke Riley. And this is a guy who's trying his damnedest to cover every blade of grass. He's making plays. He's at the line helping and run support. I mean, he's like Patrick McMorris. You're seeing the instincts on display, sniffing out the ball. I don't know. Curtis Bolton is another one who I think could be a surprise add to this 53. Who are some of the surprises you think could make this 53?
Well, I think you nailed the obvious one, which is Storm Duck. These young corners, Ethan Bonner, Cam Smith, and Storm Duck, all are going to be on this roster. Storm Duck just had he was a guy, back when he was at Louisville, right? And he went to Carolina and kind of jumped around. But he was a guy that was always, there kind of on the 3rd round radar. And, I don't know why he fell to being undrafted, but even we have some other guys that will be on the practice squad. Like Isaiah Johnson's a guy that I think they like him a lot, man. But yeah, I think Storm Duck makes it, and I do think that it's between Channing Tindall and Curtis Bolton for that last linebacker position. And when those two guys, whoever has the best game this week is going to probably make that. And look, Shannon's bringing it too.
What if Walker starts on PUP? Do both of them make it?
That could happen, right? That could happen too. So, but yeah, I think you nailed it, you guys. On offense, man, I don't think there's going to be any surprises. I mean, Lester Cotton going to probably make the roster. That's a surprise. But other than that, I think it's pretty chalk. I really do think it's chalk, and they're going to use this, the injury designation to their, it's all that fine tuning in the gymnastics of what to label people, when, where, how. I do think, one thing I do think sucks is that Craycraft went down for a little bit because he was starting to really develop into a savvy man.
And he might have had a big year this year, like quietly a big year for his standard, right? I think he was going to have a career year this year, bro.
Do you think he's out? Is he out like half the season, or is
I think he's going to miss the first 4 games.
Okay. All right.
And that matters, right? So what? He'll get his legs under him by what? Week 6, week 7, maybe?
Right.
If he's back and healthy, right? And then what if in those first 4 games Malik pops off? See, I've already told you my thoughts. I think OBJ, I think this has all been a farce. And I think now that training camp just ended, now the media can't even go to camp sessions, right? So now I think, because now they're going to start preparing for the next 18, 19 days for Jacksonville. Now I think OBJ comes back, and through walkthroughs and light practices and light work, I think now you're going to see OBJ come back. That's what listen, I know, certain people in the media have been trying to push the whole he starts the year on PUP. I don't see it, bro. Especially with the way he was coming at fans on Twitter. If you listen to what he was saying, right? Everyone in the building knows where I'm at. I know where I'm at. He was basically telling people like, yo, y'all are making a big deal out of nothing right now. I think this is just a matter of he's a veteran. What good would that have, other than getting rapport with Tua, which they've still been throwing to each other? What good would that have really done for him? And I think, 18 days until the start of the season, 19 days, that's enough time for him to ramp up because, buddy, Perkins and all these guys have been talking about he's looked totally like almost full speed on the sidelines when he's been working out. And that's been for like a couple weeks now. So, I think OBJ is going to be fine. I think that's a little bit of fear mongering right there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think the Miami Dolphins are being Phil Hellmuth and playing a little poker here. They don't want to show their hands. I think Odell. The reason I think it took some time to get the contract to where they wanted, where he wanted to sign is he had an interest from mutual teams. The Kansas City Chiefs being one. I'm talking the Ravens were interested to an extent in keeping him. Top organizations in this league were interested in keeping him. Like I think that Miami is. What they're doing is in this preseason, they're showing as little of this offense as they can with getting quality work in, getting good reps in. They're doing the blocking and tackling of their offense. But I think that there's a lot of wrinkles that we have not seen with this offense, and players like Odell and Jonnu Smith unlock that. And I think there's a lot of things that the Dolphins can do this year that we just haven't seen yet, because Odell is when the Ravens signed him for $15 million, I thought that was a horrible signing for that price.
Yeah, way too much money. How much did they guarantee you that too? Didn't there was a ton of that?
12, and it was 15 total. So that was a lot for Odell. The last time we saw Odell on the big stage, man, he was practically driving the Rams to the Super Bowl, man. And I don't know if he needs to be that type of player here, but that game against Buffalo for the division, that's the ball we're throwing to Odell Beckham, not Chase.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the ball we're throwing to Odell Beckham right there.
And he's probably open and running the damn right route
against the nickel corner.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
I think that's where you're going to see his presence felt, is when it gets a little colder, when, teams are focusing on Waddle and Tyreek. Odell still is a merchant, and he can line up in the slot. He can land on the boundary. Like, he can create things that happen. Like, I think Odell's going to have a good year in Miami. I think he's going to have a good year here, and I think he's going to be one and done. So I want to appreciate it because I do think he'll probably find his way to be like a late career mercenary. Maybe it works to the extent he comes back, but I think he's going to make some big catches for this football team.
And, kind of to Scott's point that I brought up on, because I made it in my latest short when I was talking about this, right?
Right.
I think, and this is just my opinion, between X and then guys like me and Dougley on YouTube, this team is not a fan. I mean, you've seen how hard they've come down on people sharing footage, right? I don't think they want this. I mean, I think they're already mad that the end around footage from practice came out with Jonnu Smith. Also, his usage was talked about. And this is where I'm at. I just don't think they wanted the media or fans to really see what the plan is with that third receiver. And it goes back to your point. They want to show you vanilla looks. Now that everyone's gone, they can start getting into the intricacies and the nuanced looks that they want to show this offense. And they've got almost 2.5 weeks to practice them and get them ready. Right. So I think this was about keeping things under wraps too.
Right, and I want to be careful here because I don't want to overlook Jacksonville because, look, they've beat us before, and I don't know how, but they beat us before, right?
Yeah.
We need to win that game. There's no doubt about it. I think you're going to see this Dolphins team on that Thursday night game against the Buffalo Bills. How they play that game is going to tell me so much about this team, right? Those games in the past, I feel like I get more excited than the players do. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they kind of lay an egg, right? Like, I want to see the Calais Campbells, the Jordan Poyers, the Odell Beckhams of the world, these guys that have gone and won at the highest level in this league, right? I want them to help be the leaders on this team, where the Dolphins had a great roster last year. I don't know how many great leaders they had. Calais Campbell might be the single greatest leader in the entire
Poyer
NFL.
too. And
Poyer. I mean, you're talking about.
It feels like it's amplified Ramsey's voice too a little bit more too, eh?
Right. And you think about this, and it's just crazy to illustrate this. Liam Eichenberg makes more money than Calais Campbell and Jordan Poyer combined. Right? Like, that's just crazy to me because, like, the value. And when we talk about the story about Chris Greer and the draft and everything, which his draft class looks pretty exceptional early. But what you got to look at is some of these value signings that he made to get Calais Campbell at that contract, Odell at that contract, to go get, even Aaron Brewer for what he got paid. And I'm not happy with Aaron Brewer right now. He's kind of on my naughty list. But, like, that was a good deal for a starting center, right? Like, they've made a lot of good deals. The Jalen Waddle contract was a good deal. Getting the Tua contract done, and it wasn't anywhere near the fear-mongering contracts that we saw out there. Chris Greer's got a lot of good work done this offseason, and I think his best attribute really was a strong draft class and a great free agency highlighted by high-level leading veterans that know how to weather the entire storm of an NFL season. And, I think Tyreek's the best player on this football team. I wouldn't say he's the best leader on this team, right?
No,
and
I agree.
And then Jalen Ramsey, who was the general of this team last year, he played well down the stretch. He got those 3 picks, but he was recovering from a major injury. We're going to see the best version of Jalen Ramsey this year. And the most overused word is elite, and then the second one is dogs when it comes to football. But this team has a lot more dogs barking on their team than they had last year, and that's just a fact. Jordan Brooks is another guy that's not going to – Jordan Brooks ain't going to go play two-hand touch with Josh Allen when the division's up for grabs. Like, we're going to see a demeanor, and Anthony Weaver is going to have a different demeanor here too, because he's not afraid to get in players' coaches. Like, people see this nice guy on these press conferences. Anthony Weaver is a bad dude. Like, get it right. He's gonna be up in people's face. He's gonna be challenging these guys. They're gonna play with energy. It's gonna be a good time.
Final thoughts as we head into the preseason finale against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers tomorrow?
Yeah, man. My final thoughts is I love seeing Chop Robinson go against one of the league's best and earning merit.
He had worse on skates, on one rep. He tossed them, they said.
Right. And I saw a lot of panic off of 2 reps where Chop didn't set the edge. I'm going to break some news here. They didn't draft Chop to set the edge in 2024.
No, they agreed.
Chop Robinson's going to have 8 to 10 sacks as a rookie this year. And he's going to be the guy at the midpoint of the season that they're saying, oh, the Dolphins just stole Chop Robinson. But what Scotty said is my final thought. Play it smart. Get some reps for the players that need it. Let's keep this team fresh. Let's not do anything stupid. If you play anyone who's a top half roster player, it's not even just starters to me. Let these guys go, and some of these guys that won't make this team play for other teams.
Yeah.
Find out the guys that are the 10 that you want to get on your practice squad. But let's be smart. We've made it this far with minimal injuries. River Craycraft, we'll pour one out for him. Hopefully he comes back sooner than later. But let's be smart. Let's wrap up a good preseason. Hell, man, I'll tell you what, I do like winning preseason games, even though they don't mean shit. Let's go 3-0, and let's get ourselves ready to go 1-0 when it really counts against Jacksonville.
Guys, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. I'll be live tomorrow before the game and to live react to every snap of the game, the preseason finale. So make sure you tune in and go tune into the Sideline T. They're premiering their interview with Chris Kaufman right now. Until tomorrow, you don't know what time it is. Fins up all day, every day, and we'll see y'all in the next one.